They said she was just another inmate, just another number in a broken system. But what happened to Talia Monroe inside St. Develin Correctional Facility was far beyond prison. She was 30, smart, beautiful, a former nurse with no violent record, just a single drug conviction that she always claimed was a setup, and they sent her to St. Develin, a privately run prison deep in the swamps of Louisiana, where rules don't matter, and neither do lives. 3 months after arriving, she started feeling dizzy, nauseous. Her belly began to swell. And then she found out she was pregnant. But she hadn't seen a man outside the guards. And they weren't just watching her, they were using her. Talia was raped not once, not twice, but night after night by uniformed men who treated inmates like merchandise, like entertainment. Her protests were ignored, her tears dismissed, and when the pregnancy became undeniable, they called it an inconvenience. So they drugged her. They told her it was a vitamin. They made her swallow pills that burned her stomach. She bled for days, and yet she survived. She held on, and she recorded everything. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. The prison claimed she escaped during a thunderstorm, that she slipped past fences and cameras and vanished into the swamp. But the cameras weren't working, the reports didn't match, and 6 months later, her decomposed body was found hidden in the basement, wrapped in a laundry bag, buried beneath the floor. And the baby was gone. This isn't a story about a prison break. This is a story about a cover-up, a system that turns women into profit, and a woman who fought back even when no one believed her, until her voice was all that was left. You're watching a story they tried to bury. This is the true story of Talia Monroe. If you believe some voices should never be silenced, hit subscribe. What you're about to hear, they never wanted you to know. Talia Monroe didn't cry when the judge read her sentence. 7 years for possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. She stood still in that cold courtroom, hands cuffed, lips tight, trying not to shake. She knew what they thought of her. A pretty black woman in cheap clothes, no husband, no kids, and a criminal record she didn't deserve. She wasn't innocent, not entirely, but she wasn't guilty the way they made her out to be either. The drugs weren't even hers. They were in her car, a car she lent to her cousin for a weekend. That cousin disappeared the day she was arrested. The public defender told her to take the plea, better 7 years than life. He said, "You don't want to risk it in front of a jury." So she signed, and 2 weeks later, she was shackled inside a prison bus headed deep into Louisiana. That's how she ended up at St. Develin Correctional Facility, a private prison no one had ever heard of, tucked between dead trees and swamp water, where the only way in or out was a 2-lane road barely wider than the bus itself. As the vehicle rolled through the final security gate, Talia looked out the barred window. The place looked nothing like the brochures or the glossy government files. The fence was double-wired with rusted coils. The guard towers were unmanned. The prison yard was empty, no basketball courts, no open air, just rows of metal sheds and a gray concrete building that looked more like a military bunker than a correctional facility. And silence. No noise, no shouts, not even footsteps. As she stepped off the bus, chains still clinking around her ankles, the heat slapped her face like an open hand. It was humid, rotting, like something had died in the air and never been cleaned up. A woman with a clipboard barked orders. Line up, eyes forward, inmates speak when spoken to. Talia joined the line, 12 other women, all in orange, most of them black or Latina, all of them terrified. A man in a brown uniform walked down the line slowly, like he was picking cattle at an auction. He stopped in front of Talia. Name? She hesitated. Talia Monroe. He looked her up and down, not like an officer, but like a predator. Then he smirked. Room B-17. solitary intake. Talia blinked. Wait, solitary, I just got here. He leaned in, so close she could smell tobacco and sweat. Welcome to St. Develin, sweetheart. This ain't your average prison. You'll learn that quick. That night, they locked her in a tiny concrete cell with no bed, no window, just a dirty toilet and a buzzing fluorescent light that never turned off. There were no sheets, no pillow, just the cold floor and her own thoughts. And the sounds. That's what shook her the most. Because somewhere, deep in the building, someone was screaming. Not just yelling, screaming, raw, animal, terrified. Talia pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding, too scared to speak. The screams went on for what felt like hours. No one came, no guards, no questions, nothing. The next morning, she was pulled from her cell by two women in security uniforms. They gave her a jumpsuit orange, faded, 2 sizes too big, and led her to the orientation room. It was more of a holding pen than a room. 20 women crammed into metal benches. No windows, just a TV in the corner playing a looping video about safety and compliance. But no one was watching the screen. Everyone was watching the guards. There were 6 of them, all men, all armed, all staring. One of them walked by, dragging his fingers along the shoulders of each woman as if counting them. When he passed Talia, he paused, grinned, then moved on. At lunch, she tried to ask a question. "Excuse me," she whispered to one of the kitchen workers. "How do I file a medical request?" The woman didn't even look up. She just shook her head fast, sharp, and turned away. Later that afternoon, Talia finally got assigned a bunk in Unit D top row, back corner. Her cellmate was a quiet girl named Lena, no more than 21. Lena didn't talk much, but she offered Talia a warning. "If they like you," she whispered under her breath, "you better pray they don't notice." Talia frowned. "What do you mean?" Lena's eyes darted to the hallway. "They choose. They pick the ones they want. Doesn't matter what you say." Talia felt her stomach twist. That night, as the lights dimmed, she curled up in her bunk and tried to sleep. But again, the screams returned. And this time, they were closer. 3 weeks, that's how long it took for the mask to fall. Talia had tried to keep her head down. She followed every rule, every schedule. She worked silently in the laundry room, folded shirts, scrubbed stains, and kept her mouth shut. But it didn't matter. Nothing you do matters at St. Develin. She learned that fast. It started with the showers. The guards would linger too long, stare too directly, sometimes laugh among themselves like they were watching a show. One of them, a tall, pale man named Hessler, once leaned close while Talia was drying off and whispered, "Gonna be a good week." She said nothing, kept walking, tried to forget. Then came the random inspections. Her cell was searched 3 times in 2 days, no one else's. Lena, her cellmate, started sleeping with her boots on. "You're on their list," she said quietly. "I can feel it." And then it happened. One afternoon, as Talia was mopping the hallway outside the infirmary, a voice called out behind her. "Monroe, let's go. Warden's office." Talia turned. A new guard, younger, clean-shaven, gestured for her to follow. She hesitated. "I didn't do anything wrong." He didn't blink. "Move." The walk to the warden's office was long, too long, past the chapel, past the solitary wing, up a flight of stairs she'd never been allowed to use. When they reached the top floor, the air felt different, cooler, cleaner, like the world outside didn't exist up here. The guard opened a door and nudged her inside. "Wait here." She stepped into a wide room with dark wood walls, leather chairs, and a massive desk at the end. Behind it sat Warden Raymond Beckman, mid-50s, gray hair, perfect tie, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He stood up slowly, adjusted his belt, and gestured for her to sit. Talia didn't move. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. Beckman chuckled. "Straight to the point. I like that." He walked around the desk and leaned against it, arms crossed. "You're new, Monroe, but I've been watching." Talia clenched her fists. "I haven't broken any rules." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, honey, this place rules are flexible. What matters is respect and usefulness." She didn't answer. He pushed off the desk and took a slow step forward. "You're smart. You don't start fights. You work hard, and you've got, let's say, potential." Her throat tightened. "Potential for what?" Another step. Closer. "You want better meals, extra phone time, less work duty? You'd be amazed what's possible when you're cooperative." She stepped back. "No." Beckman sighed, shook his head like a disappointed teacher. "You misunderstand me. Monroe, this isn't a choice. This is how St. Develin works. We reward loyalty, boy, and we punish resistance." He reached for the intercom. Talia's pulse spiked. She didn't wait to find out what he'd say. "I want to go back to my unit." He smiled again. "I'm sure you do." The door opened. It wasn't the same guard who brought her in. It was Hessler. Talia froze. Beckman gestured casually. "Take her to the private showers. Let her get cleaned up. And then, let's see if she learns how things are done here." Talia tried to run. Hessler caught her by the arm and slammed her against the doorframe. "Lesson number 1, he whispered into her ear. "No one says no here." She screamed, fought, kicked. But there was no one listening. That night, she lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, her body bruised, her mouth dry. Lena didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. Instead, she quietly slipped a packet of gauze under Talia's pillow taken from the infirmary, stolen at risk. Talia said nothing. She didn't even cry. Because something inside her had snapped. The next day, she woke to find her name removed from the laundry schedule. Instead, she'd been assigned to special maintenance, a vague term that usually meant nothing good. She was taken to a hidden corridor behind the kitchen, a small room with a single camera above the door and a metal table in the center. No tools, no cleaning supplies. Just a chair and a man already waiting inside. Not Beckman this time. Another guard, another client. And that was the beginning. Talia became part of what they called the rotation. They never said it out loud, never used real words, but it was clear. The women they liked, the ones who didn't fight too much, who looked a certain way, were selected, scheduled, and passed around like inventory. And the others. They were left alone, but punished in other ways. Isolation, food rations, beatings, transfers. St. Develin wasn't a prison. It was a market. And Talia, she had been priced. It started with nausea. At first, Talia thought it was the food. Everything they served in the cafeteria looked gray. Meat with no texture, vegetables that smelled like metal. But the sickness didn't stop. It hit her in the mornings, sometimes in the middle of her shift. Once, she nearly collapsed while folding sheets in the linen room. She asked for medical. They laughed. "Drink some water," a guard told her. "You'll be fine." But she wasn't fine. Her stomach bloated, her chest ached, her appetite disappeared, only to return with strange cravings. She started feeling lightheaded, angry, then unbearably tired, all within a single hour. Something wasn't right. One night, as she stood in the shower, Talia looked down at herself. Her fingers trembled as they touched the slight curve of her belly. No. She pressed her back to the wall, shaking. She didn't want to believe it. She couldn't. But she already knew. A week later, her suspicion was confirmed. During a routine checkup, one of the rare times they were taken to the infirmary for blood pressure, and wait, a quiet nurse, an older black woman with tired eyes, pulled Talia aside. Her name tag read Nurse Harlan. She looked around, closed the curtain, lowered her voice. "Listen to me carefully. I don't have much time." Talia blinked. "What is it?" "You're 12 weeks, the nurse said. Pregnant, possibly more." Talia felt her legs go numb. "No, that's not possible." Harlan gave her a look, not judgmental, not surprised, just resigned. "I've seen this before," she whispered, "more times than I can count." Talia stared at the floor. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of watching them pretend it's nothing," Harlan said, "and because you're not the only one." Talia's eyes widened. "There are others." The nurse didn't answer. She just scribbled something on a napkin and slid it into Talia's hand. "Hide this. Don't tell anyone I spoke to you. Not the guards, not the other nurses, not even your cellmate." Then she pulled back the curtain and raised her voice like nothing had happened. "Next." Talia walked out dazed, barely hearing the footsteps around her. Back in her cell, she waited until lights out. Then, under the blanket, she unfolded the napkin. It was a clinic name, an address, and a note. "If you make it out, go here. They'll help." The next few days were torture. Talia couldn't sleep. She kept one hand over her belly like a shield. How had this happened? Well, she knew how, but her mind couldn't wrap around the cruelty, the injustice, the inescapable violation. She didn't ask to be touched. She didn't ask to carry anyone's child. And now, she didn't even have the right to speak up about it. She tried once. During laundry duty, she asked to see the warden, said she had a medical emergency. 2 hours later, she was pulled from her post and shoved into a broom closet. Inside, Beckman was waiting. "You told someone he asked." Talia kept her eyes down. "I need help," she said softly. "That's all." He stepped closer. "You're not getting out of this. Monroe, you think carrying a baby changes anything." She looked up. "Whose baby is it?" His jaw clenched. "I don't know. Doesn't matter." He leaned in, whispered coldly. "Nothing growing inside you is going to save you. If anything, it's going to make things worse." Then he turned and left. The door slammed shut, and she was alone again. That night, she wrote her first journal entry. She didn't have paper, not officially, but Cora, a woman from Block F who worked in the mailroom, had once slipped her a small notebook, torn and water-stained, hidden inside a Bible. Talia kept it under her mattress. She wrote slowly, carefully, in small letters with a dull pencil stolen from the intake desk. "If I die in here, I want someone to know the truth." She wrote about Beckman, about the rotation, about the pregnancy, and the nurse who risked everything just to tell her. She didn't know if anyone would ever read it, but writing made her feel less invisible. Weeks passed. Her stomach grew, Not enough to be obvious to most, but enough that she could feel it. She spoke less, ate less. Guards began to notice her silence. One night, Hessler stopped her in the hallway and stared at her midsection. "You gaining weight, Monroe." She forced a smile. "Must be the gruel." He didn't laugh. The next morning, she was pulled for medication. It wasn't scheduled. No one explained what it was for. They just handed her a paper cup with 2 pills and a cup of water. "What is it?" she asked. The nurse behind the desk, a new face, someone she didn't recognize, shrugged. "Just a supplement. Standard." She hesitated. Something about the pills looked off, pink, chalky, like antacid tablets. Her fingers shook. She raised the cup to her lips and faked the swallow, tucked the pills under her tongue, held them there until she reached her cell. Later, when no one was looking, she spit them into a tissue and buried it inside her mattress lining. The next day, the same thing happened. More pills, more pressure, more stares. She realized what they were doing. They were trying to make it go away, quietly, chemically, without records, without questions. She had no medical file, no prenatal care, no name for the father, and no rights. They stopped asking. By the second week, they no longer pretended. Every other day, Talia was called in for medication. The same 2 pills, the same paper cup, the same cold stare from the nurse. She no longer asked what they were. She already knew. Each time, she faked the swallow, tucked the pills under her tongue, spit them out behind the toilet, flushed some, hid others. But it wasn't enough. They changed tactics. One morning, she was pulled out of line during roll call. 2 guards grabbed her arms, said nothing, and dragged her to the infirmary. There, Nurse Harlan was gone. In her place, a man in a white coat, mid-40s, round glasses, a name tag that read Dr. Myers. He didn't smile. "Lie down," he ordered. Talia froze. "Why?" "You've missed your medication. We're moving to a faster method." She tried to back away. 2 guards pushed her down onto the table. A strap wrapped across her chest, another across her legs. Her scream caught in her throat. She kicked, thrashed, begged. "Please, you can't." But the needle was already in his hand. He injected her in the thigh. "It's a mild muscle relaxant," he said calmly. "You'll feel cramping. Don't worry, it'll pass." And then he left. The guards unstrapped her and hauled her back to her unit like garbage. The pain started 2 hours later. It was slow at first, a dull ache in her stomach. Then the cramping hit. Sharp, relentless, blinding. Talia collapsed onto the concrete floor of her cell, curled into herself, unable to breathe. Blood soaked through her jumpsuit. She cried silently, not from pain, but from fury, from helplessness, from the sick, unbearable knowledge that something inside her was dying. Lena tried to help, slipped her a wet cloth, whispered prayers. No nurse came, no guard checked. The screams from her cell that night went unanswered. In the morning, she could barely stand. She cleaned herself with toilet paper and cold water, wiped her legs, her arms, her face, and flushed the blood-stained rags before anyone saw. Her belly was flatter now, but the pain remained. She had no idea if the pregnancy had ended. She didn't know if there was still life inside her or just loss. But she refused to break. That same night, Cora slipped her something during dinner. A square plastic case, no bigger than a matchbox. hidden under the mashed potatoes. "Keep it dry," she whispered, "and don't get caught." Inside was a voice recorder, old, scratched, but functional. Talia stared at it like it was a sacred object. "How?" "Don't ask," Cora said. "Just record everything, and one day we'll get it out." For the next few days, Talia documented everything she could. She spoke late at night under her blanket, whispering into the recorder with shaking hands. She described the pills, the injections, the cramps, the guards, the warden, the nurse who tried to help, the one who didn't. She recorded the sound of Hessler threatening another inmate in the hallway, the muffled cries coming from behind the medical wing, the conversations in the laundry room where inmates spoke in code, too afraid to say the word rape. And then she hid the recorder. Not under her mattress, not in her clothing. She pried loose the bottom lining of her toilet tank, a hollow space full of mildew and rust. There, wrapped in plastic and tape, she buried the device. No one would look there. Not unless they were really looking. Days later, she was summoned again. This time, not to the infirmary but to Beckman's office. It was unusual. They rarely called her up twice. She knew something was wrong the moment the guards stayed behind and shut the door. Beckman sat behind his desk, eyes cold. "Are you hiding something, Monroe?" She blinked. No. He stood up slowly, walked around the desk, and circled her like a wolf. "We had a little surprise inspection. Random, of course. But one of the nurses mentioned you've been asking questions about pills, about the baby." Talia stayed quiet. He leaned in, voice low. "There is no baby." Her breath caught. "What?" "You were never pregnant," he said. "You were confused, delusional. Maybe you wanted attention. Maybe you thought it would protect you, but it's over." She stepped back. "That's not true." He smirked. "No proof, no medical files, no ultrasound, just your word against ours." He picked up a file and waved it in front of her. "This says you're emotionally unstable, prone to manipulation, possible suicidal ideation." She stared at the folder, at her name typed across the top. "You faked that." He shrugged. "We document what we see, and what we see is a problem inmate." She clenched her fists. "I'm not going to stop." He nodded, almost amused. "Good, I love a challenge." Then he turned away. "Take her back." Talia knew she was running out of time. She could feel it in the way the guards watched her now with suspicion instead of hunger, the way Beckman spoke to her, as if she were already a problem marked for disposal. The pills hadn't stopped. The injections came less frequently now, but the damage had already been done. She hadn't bled again, but she hadn't felt anything either. No flutters, no movement. She wasn't sure if the baby, if it had even made it that far, was still alive. And that uncertainty is how it hollowed her out. But it didn't break her. If anything, it made her more dangerous. Each night, she continued whispering into the recorder. She chronicled every detail, each conversation, each threat, each silence. She read out loud the notes she had scribbled on napkins and toilet paper timelines, names, locations, cell shifts, medical charts she'd stolen glances at during passing moments in the infirmary. Her voice, trembling but steady, began to sound like a witness giving testimony. And then she made a decision. She couldn't keep the recorder forever. One day, they'd find it, and when they did, it would all disappear. She needed to get it out. There was only one person she trusted. Cora. The quiet powerhouse from Block F. Cora had survived 3 years in St. Develin without disappearing, which, in this place, made her a legend. She had connections. She worked in the mailroom twice a week, and she knew how to make things move. So one night, in the dark corner of the dining hall, Talia leaned in. "I have something, and I need it to leave this prison." Cora didn't ask what. She just nodded. "Wrap it tight. Waterproof. I'll get it in the box next Thursday." Talia placed the recorder into a hollowed-out Bible. She wrapped it in plastic from food trays, sealed it with melted soap, and stitched the cover back together with dental floss. Inside, she inserted a note. "If you find this, please listen. Her name is Talia Monroe. She didn't run. She was erased." That Thursday, Cora walked out of the mailroom with a brown paper package under her arm. She handed it to a prison clerk, said it was being sent to a church in Baton Rouge. No one questioned her. Cora had built years of quiet trust with the staff. The clerk logged it, slapped a postage sticker on the box, and placed it in the outgoing pile. It was gone. Talia didn't sleep that night. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, praying the package made it through. Because if it did, someone would hear her. 3 days later, Cora was gone. Not transferred, not relocated. Gone. Her bunk was empty, her name removed from the roster. No official notice, no explanation. Talia asked a nearby guard, casually, pretending not to care. "Hey, where'd Cora go?" The guard didn't look up. "Suicide. Hung herself in the showers." Talia's blood ran cold. "That's not possible. I saw her yesterday." "Then you saw a ghost," he said, smirking, and walked away. That night, Talia barely moved. Her hands shook, her throat burned. She felt the walls close in around her. She had endangered Cora. She had sent her friend into a trap. And now, Cora was dead. She curled up in her bunk, arms wrapped tight around herself, and for the first time in weeks, she cried out loud. Not silent, not quiet, loud, guttural sobs, the kind that scrape the bottom of your soul. And no one came. But somewhere outside those prison walls, the tape had arrived. Elijah Carter was a freelance journalist, 34, wrote mostly about corrupt politicians and police brutality in the South. He lived in New Orleans, in a one-bedroom apartment above a pawn shop. He didn't believe in miracles, but he believed in patterns. And when the package arrived in the mail, no return address, no signature, just a battered Bible with a voice recorder tucked inside, he knew he had stumbled into something big. He hit play. The voice that came through was raspy, frightened, clear. "This is Talia Monroe. I was sent to St. Develin Correctional for a drug charge I didn't commit. I was raped by the staff. I became pregnant. They tried to kill it. They tried to kill me. I'm still here, but I don't know for how much longer." Elijah sat frozen. The tape continued. 38 minutes of testimony. Names, locations, descriptions. He listened to it 3 times. Then he picked up his phone. It started with thunder. The storm rolled in just after sunset, thick, violent clouds swallowing the last light of day. The rain came fast, hitting the metal roofs like a war drum. Lightning split the sky in jagged lines. The wind howled through the cracks in the prison windows. It was the kind of storm that drowned out screams. Talia was in her cell, curled beneath her thin blanket, watching water drip through the corner of the ceiling. Her stomach had been cramping again, not as sharp as before, but steady, like a warning. Lena sat across from her, whispering a prayer. Neither of them said much anymore. Words had become dangerous. But something about that night felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Even the guards weren't doing their usual rounds. Just after midnight, the lights flickered once, twice, and then complete darkness. For the first time since arriving at St. Develin, the electricity was completely gone. No humming lights, no security buzzers, no cameras. Only thunder, only rain. Lena reached over, grabbed Talia's hand. "You okay?" Talia nodded, but she wasn't. She felt it deep in her chest, a pressure she couldn't explain. Something was coming. At 3:14 a.m., a guard stopped outside their cell. Not Hessler, not anyone she recognized. A new face, pale, sweating. He fumbled with the keys, opened the door without saying a word. "Talia Monroe," he whispered. She sat up. "What is this?" "Medical check. You've been requested." "By who?" He didn't answer. Just grabbed her arm. Lena stood up, alarmed. "She's sick. She can't go out in this weather. Let her rest." The guard turned slowly. His smile was hollow. "She'll be back." Talia never came back. The next morning, Unit D buzzed with questions. Did she fight? Was it solitary? Did they transfer her? The guard said nothing. At noon, an announcement rang through the intercom. Inmate Talia Monroe is no longer in custody. Escaped during the storm. Investigation ongoing. Lena dropped her tray. Bullshit. Every inmate knew it. No one escaped St. Develin. There were 2 layers of fencing, 30 guards, motion detectors, and last night during the power outage, all of it had been offline. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. And no one had seen her leave. No cameras, no footprints, no body. Just gone. Elijah Carter didn't buy it either. When he got the email from a contact at the Louisiana Department of Corrections, he knew something was off. Subject Talia Monroe, escape report, status active fugitive, time of escape 3:00 a.m. during electrical malfunction. Attached a grainy black and white photo of Talia from her intake day. Under it, a warning, do not approach, considered emotionally unstable. Elijah stared at the screen, stunned. She was gone, just like that. No follow-up, no press release, no internal investigation. He picked up his phone and dialed the number on the napkin that came with the recorder the clinic nurse Harlan had written down. The voice on the other end answered in a hush. This is Dr. Welks. I'm calling about a patient, or someone who is supposed to be. Name. Talia Monroe. Silence. Then she never came. What do you mean? She was on a list from someone inside. We were expecting her. She never showed. Elijah's throat tightened. She's missing. I know. How do you know? Because we've had 3 others, same story. Pregnant, abused, then gone. Back inside saying, Develin, Lena couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the moment Talia was taken, the guard's face, his voice, the way he looked past her like she didn't exist. She waited for days. Watched the halls, listened at night. No news, no sign. She tried asking around, whispered to others during work duty, but most shook their heads, some looked away. Fear had returned, louder than ever. And then someone slid something under her pillow. A folded piece of paper. Inside one sentence. Check the drain behind the chapel. That night, after dinner, Lena slipped away. She waited until the guards rotated shifts, then darted behind the chapel, a small concrete building rarely used. The drain was rusted, half covered in leaves and dirt. She reached inside. Her fingers touched plastic. She pulled it out. A sealed bag, but inside a torn napkin and a voice recorder. Talia's voice filled her ears. The prison tried to move on. Talia Monroe's name was scrubbed from the walls, her bunk reassigned, her file marked, "Escaped, do not pursue." Inmate whisperings died down. Guards warned anyone caught spreading lies would lose privileges, and just like that, she became a ghost. But outside the walls, her voice was still moving. Elijah Carter published the first article 2 weeks later. Pregnant inmate disappears during storm. Was it an escape or something worse? The piece included snippets from the voice recorder, descriptions of the abuse, allegations against Warden Beckman, mentions of forced medication, and falsified medical reports. The story didn't trend. It didn't go viral. But it reached the right people. One of them was Josie DeMarco, a junior attorney at the Civil Rights Advocacy Center. She had just finished a case involving a death in custody at another Louisiana facility. She read Elijah's article twice. Then she called him. "This isn't just one woman," she said. "It's a system." Elijah sent her the full recordings. Josie filed a petition, requested the Department of Corrections investigate. She got silence. Then a threat. Her office received an anonymous letter. "Drop it. She's dead. There's nothing left to find." But they were wrong. There was something left. Inside St. Develin, a maintenance worker named Julian Reyes was tasked with inspecting a blocked drain in the basement beneath the kitchen. He hated working down there. It always smelled like mold and bleach, and the lights flickered too much. That day, he was alone. As he followed the main pipe, he noticed something strange, a patch of concrete near the back wall that didn't match the rest of the floor. It was newer, smoother, and slightly raised. He tapped it with a wrench. Hollow. Curious and against protocol, Julian pried it open. Under the thin concrete slab was a layer of tarp. And beneath that, the smell hit him like a punch to the throat. It was decay. He stepped back, hand shaking, called his supervisor. Within the hour, the prison was on lockdown. 2 hours later, the coroner's van arrived. They pulled out a body. Female, severely decomposed, wrapped in a dirty laundry bag, twisted with cords. Her fingernails were broken. Her left wrist showed signs of bruising. Her mouth had been taped shut. In her jumpsuit pocket was a crumpled napkin. It read, "If I die in here, don't believe them." The autopsy came back 2 days later. Cause of death, cardiac arrest due to drug toxicity. Manner of death, undetermined, possibly homicide. But the report included something else. Inside her womb, remnants of fetal tissue. She had been pregnant. Elijah got the tip from an anonymous caller. He drove straight to the morgue, used the name freelance press investigator, asked for identification of the body found at St. Develin. At first, they hesitated. Then they showed him the intake photo for comparison. The curve of the jaw, the scar on her chin. It was her. Talia Monroe. Not escaped, not missing. Murdered. Buried under concrete, in the walls of the very system that said she walked away. Back at St. Develin, panic spread behind closed doors. Warden Beckman held a meeting with senior staff. His voice was calm, but his eyes were burning. No one speaks to press, no one speaks to lawyers. If you get a subpoena, you report it to me. This doesn't leave this room. But it was already too late. One of the nurses had taken photos of the autopsy report. Another inmate had smuggled out the story to her sister, and Elijah had published again. This time, the title read, "She didn't escape. They buried her." And the world started to listen. The backlash came fast. Within 72 hours of Elijah's second article, the one with Talia's autopsy photo, the napkin note, and the recorded audio, the story broke nationwide. Morning shows picked it up. Radio hosts debated it. Social media exploded. Pregnant inmate found buried in prison basement. Private prison scandal deepens, voices from the inside emerge. Who was Talia Monroe, and why did no one listen? By the end of the week, over 2 million people had heard her voice. And they were angry. Very angry. FBI agents arrived at St. Develin on a gray Thursday morning. Black SUVs, clipboards, boxes, badges. Warden Beckman stood at the front gate, arms crossed. This facility is private property. One agent held up a warrant. Not anymore. They searched everything. Offices, medical rooms, laundry sheds, computer drives, storage lockers. And what they found was worse than anyone imagined. Multiple falsified death certificates. Fake transfer documents. Storage of unlogged medications, high-dose abortifacients, sedatives, and tranquilizers. Security footage with timestamp loops and entire nights mysteriously missing. And worst of all, a private server hidden inside Beckman's office. Encrypted, but not unbreakable. Inside were hundreds of video files, underground footage. Women being assaulted, drugged, dragged, laughed at. It was a trafficking ring, disguised as discipline, disguised as prison. Beckman didn't just allow it, he ran it. On June 3rd, Warden Raymond Beckman was arrested. So were 7 other staff members, including Officer Hessler and Dr. Myers. Charges: conspiracy, sexual assault, manslaughter, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, human trafficking. At Beckman's arraignment, the judge read off the indictment. He showed no emotion. When asked for comment, Beckman only said, "They were inmates, not people." The courtroom went silent. Then someone shouted from the back, "She was more human than you'll ever be." More voices began to emerge. Other women, former inmates. Some had escaped the prison years earlier. Others were relatives of those who never came home. They told stories almost identical to Talia's. Pills disguised as vitamins, secret transfers, medical checks that ended in bruises. Some had been pregnant too. Some had miscarried. A few had children they were told had never existed. One of them, a woman named Kendra Hollis, said quietly during an interview, "Talia was the first one who didn't just survive it, she documented it." The Louisiana Department of Corrections tried to distance itself. This was an isolated case, one facility, one rogue warden. But no one bought that anymore. Protests erupted outside state buildings. Civil rights organizations demanded broader investigations into all private prisons in the South. People began speaking out loud. They carried signs that read, "Justice for Talia." They buried her voice, now we raise it. "Shut down St. Develin." Crowds chanted her name. Murals appeared on prison reform banners. Her story was no longer a whisper. It was a movement. The governor was forced to respond. A full-scale federal probe was launched. Develin was permanently shut down. But for those who knew her, those who cared, it didn't feel like a victory. Because Talia was still gone. She never got to see the world hear her name, never got to walk out through the front gate like a survivor. She had died alone, in silence, under concrete. And all that remained was her voice. Elijah was offered book deals, interview spots, speaking events. He turned most of them down. He only cared about finishing what Talia started. Together with attorney Josie DeMarco, he helped draft a formal policy bill, the Talia Monroe Prison Transparency Act. If passed, it would mandate 24/7 surveillance in all solitary and medical units, independent third-party investigators for inmate deaths, prohibition of private server storage for internal prison footage, whistleblower protections for inmates and staff. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. They buried her twice. First under concrete, then under paperwork, lies, silence, dismissals. But her voice refused to stay buried. Months passed. The prison was empty now. Develin Correctional Facility stood abandoned rust curling its fences, weeds choking its walkways. The cameras were gone, the lights forever off. But across the country, people still whispered her name. In courtrooms, in classrooms, on podcasts, in vigils where candles lit photos of her smiling face. Talia Monroe. Not inmate 924 Fate. A woman, a victim, a witness, a fighter. Elijah released the full audio recordings. Unedited, raw, every breath, every pause, every trembling word. People listened, and they wept. In one of her final entries, Talia said, "They think we don't matter, that our pain is quiet, but pain echoes. And if this is the only thing I leave behind, let it be loud." It was deafening. A mural went up in Baton Rouge. 3 stories tall, her face painted in warm tones, eyes lifted to the sky. At the bottom, in bold white letters, "Her voice remains." Lena Talia's former cellmate was released early for good behavior. She never forgot. On the outside, she found Nurse Harlan, who had retired in silence. Together, they attended a hearing in Washington, D.C., where the Talia Monroe Prison Transparency Act was passed into law. Lena spoke at the podium. Her voice cracked as she said, "I was there when they took her. I was the last person she looked at, and I didn't stop them. I couldn't. But I will never be silent again." The entire chamber stood in applause. For Josie DeMarco, it became her life's work. She founded the Monroe Project, a legal aid initiative for incarcerated women across America. In its first year, the project uncovered 42 previously unreported cases of abuse in private prisons. In its second year, they shut one down. And Elijah. He visited Talia's mother. Brought flowers, brought apologies, brought a framed photo of the mural and a flash drive containing every recording. Mrs. Monroe, a woman with eyes full of grief and pride, hugged him. "You didn't just tell her story," she said. "You brought her home." The baby was never found. There were rumors, theories. Some believed the fetus had been extracted. Others thought it never survived the chemical attacks. But one thing was certain, the truth had been stolen. And justice though powerful, had come too late to save them both. Still, Talia's story did what she prayed it would. It lit a fire. It gave voice to women who had been silenced. It shook a system that had long convinced itself it could not be touched. It reminded the world that behind every prison wall is a human being. And sometimes a hero. If you heard her voice, if you felt her pain, then you owe it to her to carry it forward. Tell her story. Say her name. Don't let them bury it again. This was the story of Talia Monroe. Thank you for listening. If you believe in justice, if you believe in truth, please subscribe. Because the next voice waiting to be heard could be the one that saves someone else.